Before we start shooting, we need to be able to figure out what's happening in these images. Every single photo can be broken down into the individual elements. Don't worry about memorizing these. I just want you to be able to start being able to identify them when you see them and to have the vocabulary. So let's take a look at what's in your photographs.
Video 5, elements of an image. So we're going to break an image into its digestible parts. We're going to ask ourselves, what are the elements of a photo? We're going to do an activity to identify and recreate critical elements, and then as always, some hazards and hot tips. Before we start shooting, and in order to figure out how to recreate our inspiration images, we need to know what's happening inside the frame. So I'm going to show you how to break down every single photo into its small digestible pieces. Photography is like cooking. It's additive. So you start with a 4x6 frame, and then you add your subject, light, props, and background. The real magic happens when everything comes together harmoniously to convey your why. Yum, 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 yum! Really captivating images have 1 to 3 elements that without, the image just wouldn't be the same. The challenge is to isolate those and then recreate them within your budget and skill set. Here are some images that are defined by their critical elements. How can you use these elements to convey your why? Let's start with your frame. Which way are you holding your camera? Flip it around for a vertical frame. Just for reference, this is how we set up this shot. Once we know what direction our frame is, we have to worry about everything inside the frame. So you start with a blank set, make sure your horizon line is straight. Now we add our subject. The main light is your brightest light, coming in from the right in this case, and then the fill light coming in from the left to soften the shadows. Your foreground is in the front to your background, which creates depth. If you add a flat background, it reduces the depth. A black background has more contrast. A color background can affect the subject. The placement of the subject influences your composition. Perspective is the angle at which you see your subject. It changes the shape of the subject. How big is your subject in the frame? The further away, the more background. The closer, the less background and more subject. Activity: identify and recreate critical elements. Step 1. Identify the most interesting element in each inspiration image. So let's figure out what the most important thing in your image is. What do your inspiration images make you feel? Some questions to ask yourself could be, which element makes you feel like that? What could you remove from the frame and still tell the same story? What is essential? Write down, circle, sketch out the most important or interesting parts of each of your inspiration images. Next, we're going to play around with it. Step 2. See in 3D and think outside the frame. Before we start with your project, let's try out some ways of taking different images. The easiest way is to move yourself around the subject. Keep your why in mind and think in 3D. Take a picture of your subject 3 ways without moving it. Move around your subject in all 3 planes: up, down, side to side. Get closer, move further back. Which best illustrates your why? Which tells the story the best? You can also do this backwards. So if you want to start by writing down the most important thing you want to show in each of the 5 images, that's a good way to approach this as well. Here are some examples of what I had in mind.
Using the different elements in a photograph with the ease of a professional comes with time and patience, but with a little planning, you can do it enough to take some cool shots. So let's wrap up your pre-production in the next lesson.